All right, good morning, young scientists. We are into week number 2 of science learning at home. Now, this week we're going to be continuing looking at animal adaptations, and I'm going to give you directions and an example on how to complete one of the projects that needs to be turned in for science while we're learning at home. We'll talk about that project more toward the end. Let me give you some of the information that you're going to need. Everything that we did this week and last week was from the Phase 2 Learn at Home packet for science. We're going to go through resources 1 through 5, and we're going to talk about the summative assessment or project at the end. So here we go. Now that we've seen some examples of physical adaptations, let's talk about behavioral adaptations. And just a reminder, physical adaptations are something that an animal has that help it survive. Let's say a tiger's long, sharp teeth help it to catch prey and eat the food that it needs to eat. Those are physical adaptations. Now we're going to look at behavioral adaptations, or things that animals do to help them survive. Let's talk about behavioral adaptations. These adaptations are something that an animal does to help it survive. One type of behavioral adaptation that I'm sure you've heard of is hibernation. Hibernation is when some animals go into a deep sleep in which their body activities slow down and they can live off stored nutrients and fat from their food. Black bears and groundhogs are two animals that hibernate through the winter. Before hibernating begins each year, they eat lots of food to build up fat in their bodies. They can live off this fat as they sleep through cold winter months when it's hard to find food. Now, bears and groundhogs are not the only types of animals that hibernate. Let me share some other examples of hibernating animals with you. Do hibernators eat? Before hibernating, animals eat and eat. Bears sometimes gain more than 40 pounds or 18 kilograms a week. The extra fat helps them live through the winter. Some animals eat during hibernation. Chipmunks carry berries and seeds to their burrows in cheek pouches. They store food in their burrows and wake up every few days to eat. Animal fact, a chipmunk can store up to 8 pounds of food in its burrow. Wow. A place to rest. Many animals dig burrows deep below the frost line to hibernate. Chipmunks and other ground squirrels dig winter homes with rooms for sleeping and storing food. They hide the entrances under rocks, trees, or bushes. Black bears and grizzly bears dig dens in hillsides or under logs. They curl up inside with grass, dry leaves, and moss for warmth. Under covers. Some animals crawl under things to stay warm. Wood frogs and box turtles crawl under rocks, logs, or piles of leaves. Snails slip under rocks and leaves too. They make hard, chalky lids to close their shell openings. Their shells become snug sleeping bags. Down in the mud. In winter, ponds form thick ice on top, but under that icy roof, animals sleep. Snapping turtles and frogs spend the winter buried in mud on the pond bottom. The mud and pond water keep them from freezing. In dark caves. Bats sleep where it's buggy, damp, and dark. Caves gives bats the moisture and warmth they need during hibernation. Bats wake up now and then to drink. Moisture also keeps their wings from drying and cracking. Alone or with others. If you could peek at hibernating animals, what would you see? You would see woodchucks and male bears sleeping alone. Hundreds of garter snakes, like the ones in this picture, coil together in dens. Small animals such as female skunks and marmots hibernate in groups. When the weather gets warmer, hibernating animals sense it's time to wake up. They move slowly and shiver to help get warm. It takes chipmunks and other small animals nearly an hour to wake up. Larger animals can take several days or weeks to fully wake up. Another behavioral adaptation you've probably seen in action is migration. Migration is when some animals go on a long distance journey from one place to another. Have you ever seen a flock of geese flying in a V shape across the sky? Geese migrate south during cold months so they can find food more easily. Monarch butterflies will fly up to 3,000 miles to find warmer weather in Mexico. Humpback whales will migrate thousands of miles to reach warm water in order to have their babies. And I think that whales are really fascinating creatures. So we're not going to look at how the humpback migrates, but we're going to look at the gray whale migration, which is one of the longest of any animal in the world. Many mammals migrate, but no mammal migrates as far as the big gray whale. It travels 6,000 miles, then back again, and most of its traveling is done on an empty stomach. Gray whales love the cold waters near the North Pole because these waters are full of the food they love to eat. The whales live on tiny ocean shrimp and worms, and the Arctic waters are full of these in the summer. The whales eat and eat and eat, straining the tiny food through strips of baleen in their mouths. Instead of teeth, the grays have baleen, long strips of hard material similar to fingernails. The gray whales swim and eat mostly alone through the summer, but in the fall, they will begin to look for some traveling companions because the whales know one thing for certain, that they must migrate. In winter, the Arctic seas are going to be filled with solid ice, and the whales will die if they stay. The first gray whales to leave the Arctic are the pregnant females. These expectant mothers want to have plenty of time to reach the warm waters of California and Mexico before they give birth. No mother wants to have a baby in icy water. The other whales will follow, and in small groups they will all travel down the Pacific coast. Once they leave the Arctic, the whales won't find as much food again, and it may be as long as 8 months before they eat. But the whales have stored a lot of fat in their bodies, called blubber, and this will keep them alive. As they travel, the whales often swim near shore, and people along the way are thrilled. They wave to the whales from the rocky cliffs and travel out in boats to say hello to them. When finally the gray whales reach the warm tropical waters in January, the pregnant females will give birth, and the other whales will mate. With new calves among them, all of the whales will enjoy life in the peaceful lagoons for a while. Then in March, they will be ready to head back to the Arctic for the summer. They haven't forgotten how they love to eat there. This time the males will leave first, and the females and calves will stay behind for another several weeks. The calves will have more time to grow and get stronger for the long journey. Finally, all of the whales will travel up past Oregon, past Washington, through the waters of Alaska and Asia, up near the North Pole. How do the whales find these Arctic waters? No one is sure. The whales might follow the shape of the ocean beds. They might sense the Earth's magnetic field, like living compasses. They may use echolocation, sending out sounds which bounce back and describe what is all around. But somehow the whales will travel that long 6,000-mile journey north, and they will find the same chilly waters they left behind. When they arrive in the Arctic, they will separate and enjoy a summer of fine ocean eating. But just before the Arctic winter arrives, before the ice, something will tell the whales to find each other again, to find some company for another long, long swim. A behavioral adaptation you might not have heard of is called dormancy. Dormancy is when an organism slows down because of some kind of stress in the environment. For example, it might be too cold or dry for the organism to survive without going dormant. During the winter, you can see lots of trees that are dormant. These trees drop their leaves and wait for better weather in the spring to begin growing again. Now it's your turn. Let's see if you can identify the type of behavioral adaptation being used in each of the examples below. Fill in the chart to indicate whether the organism is demonstrating hibernation, migration, or dormancy. Our first example is an oak tree. It drops all of its leaves in the fall. Is that tree hibernating, migrating, or experiencing a state of dormancy? What do you think? If you said dormancy, you're absolutely right. Let's look at the wildebeest. It moves across the plains of Africa in search of green pastures. Moving across. Maybe it sounds like they're traveling. What do you think? Is it hibernation, migration, or dormancy? If you said migration, you are absolutely right. And then let's look at the marmot. It enters a deep sleep during the winter. And yes, by default, the answer for this question is hibernation. All right. So now let's talk about the green sea turtle. The adults move from tropical locations to nesting sites along subtropical coastlines. What do you think they're doing? Hibernating? Migrating? Are they in a state of dormancy? That's right, they are migrating. Animals usually migrate for two reasons. One, to get to better weather, or two, they're following their food. Now you might be thinking, how do animals know when to hibernate or where to migrate? Are hibernation, migration, and dormancy the only behavioral adaptations animals have? Well, some animals are born with natural behaviors that they need in order to survive in their environment. These behaviors are called instincts. For example, a beaver is born knowing how to build a dam. The behavioral adaptation is an instinct. A spider is born knowing how to spin a web. It is an instinct. When you were a baby, your instinct was to cry in order to let someone know that you needed something. Both hibernation and migration are examples of instincts in animals that we have already read about. Animals don't just operate on instincts, though. Animals also demonstrate learned behaviors. These are behaviors that are taught or learned from experiences. A bear cub has to be taught to hunt, just like you learn how to talk, read, or maybe even ride a bike. A dog can learn to sit, stay, and roll over on command. Animals use a combination of many physical and behavioral adaptations to help them survive in their environment. Now you get to use your knowledge of adaptations to complete a final project. All right, here is your project. This is what you need to do. Last week, your homework, and if you did it, you've already finished half of your project. Congratulations on being so responsible, is you needed to create your animal. Here is an example of my animal. Now, you didn't see me draw it, and it looks like professional quality art, but I promise you, I did draw it myself. Now, my animal has the legs of a deer, because deer can run really fast. It also has a turtle shell. You can tell your parents about what this might be with our pollution unit. And it also has the horn of a narwhal. Now, how did this turtle shell and narwhal horn help my turtle survive? On the bottom of your project sheet, and this is right at the end of resource number 5, Phase 2 Science, Learn at Home, it asks for physical adaptations. Number 1, my shell, and number 2, my horn. Then it asks, how does this adaptation help your creature survive? Well, my shell helps to protect my creature against predators or animals that want to turn it into a delicious snack. And my narwhal horn is used to dig for food. Now, the second part of the project that you'll need to complete this week is all about behavioral adaptations. What does your animal do to help it survive? First, my animal migrates to follow its source of food. Its food is not always in the same place, so they will herd up together and they will travel or migrate to make sure that they have plenty of food to fill their bellies. And number 2, the behavioral adaptation is it builds and nests in a tree to stay safe. Now, this may not look like a tree climbing animal, but you'd be quite surprised at how adept it is at that process. So what you're going to need to do to complete your first project for science, and we do have 3 for science, 3 for math, 3 for reading, 3 for social studies. Don't stress, we're going to walk you through all of them. Is to 1, draw. You can build a model, or you can use a computer design program to create your animal. Label the 2 physical adaptations that we did last week. Mine is a horn and a turtle shell. Yours will be something completely different. Then you're going to fill in the chart just like we filled in here. List your 2 physical adaptations, the shell and the horn. Then tell us, and I didn't use complete sentences here, I just used very brief comments about how these adaptations help your animal to survive. My shell protects it. My horn helps it find food. Then you're going to do the same thing for behavioral adaptations. What does your animal do to help it survive? And there could be hundreds of different behavioral adaptations that your animal uses. Once you have completed your project, please go ahead and have mom or dad snap a picture of it with their phone, or you can use your phone too. I know you have one. And either email it to me or text it to me so that I can take a look at it and give you feedback on how well you are doing. If there's things that need to be improved, I will write back to you and say, hey, I really think we need to look at this so we can make sure that you're turning in your best work. If your project is good to go, I will let you know that you have completed your first science project for the year. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have any questions about this. I am always available to help you learn. Thanks. Bye.